And I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Again, if you do have additional questions that come in or that you would like to have posed during this particular time, you can just kind of hold your card in the air and we'll get it to Elise or one of our staff members that will probably recognize, again, your wave so that we can get that question. I think we have one right here in the middle that I know is being posed. With that being said, my name is Millard House. I'm the Director of Schools with the Clarksville-Montgomery County School District. And I want to first of all thank each and every one of you in joining us this evening. We know that over the course of the last several years, school safety has been a major focus in schools across America. But what we're here today about is Clarksville-Montgomery County School District and kind of what we're doing as a school district. I also want to thank both Chief Ansley and Sheriff Fuson for being here as well. They are partners that we generally work with very closely in terms of everything that we do around school safety. Before we get started, I'd like to recognize a few people in the audience. I believe I have two board members, Charlie Patterson and Jimmy Garland, that are here. If you would raise your hand, thank you guys for being here. I also have, as I mentioned, Chief Ansley and Sheriff Fuson. We definitely appreciate them being here. And ironically, we have a parent in the school district that happens to be the Director of School Safety for the state of Tennessee. And Jenna Robinson, if you raise your hand, thank you for being here also. It's a blessing to have a parent in your capacity, knowing that you brought your child to the Clarksville-Montgomery County School District simply because you knew and had confidence in terms of where safety was in the school system. You know, what I will say is, as a school director that's been around just less than about a year, about 8 months to be specific, in the Clarksville-Montgomery County School District, I worked as a chief operating officer in the Charlotte-Mecklenburg School District, which is about 140,000 students, over 130 buildings that we had at that time. During Sandy Hook, or right after Sandy Hook in 2012, it was interesting because lots of school districts across the country were reactive in terms of what they did. And we were one of those school districts. The county was able to give us quite a bit of money to move forward to implement several different safety things. And what I can tell you is that of the 6 major things that we implemented in Charlotte at that time, of those 6 things, radios, emergency radios, entryways, visitor management systems, all of those things are in the Clarksville-Montgomery County School District. So I feel very good about where we are, and we'd like to share information with you all this evening, just to kind of give you some insight in reference to the purpose of this forum this evening, is to discuss our current school safety measures so that the community can ask questions and get as much relevant information around school safety as possible. As I mentioned to you, we definitely want to take questions, and we have a format in terms of what that looks like, as we explained earlier, and we look forward to answering those questions and having some experts in the field to help us along the way in doing so. To give you guys some information, I'll go through a few slides real quick in reference to what the Clarksville-Montgomery County School District does specifically. We have emergency management plans in place. This is an online plan that each school focuses on. Actually have plans that are focused on local fire, police, emergency medical services, and other responding agencies. This group that you see on the screen right now is a group that we call our stakeholders group. And this group actually meets on a consistent basis, actually both Chief Ansley as well as Sheriff Fuson. They're either at those meetings or have representatives at those meetings on a quarterly basis, and we sit down to talk about what we can do better, what needs to be focused on an annual basis to ensure that we're getting better and focusing our efforts around school safety. Tommy Butler, if you would raise your hand, he's in charge of safety for the Clarksville-Montgomery County School District specifically, And his focus is to ensure that we organize these meetings as well as several other things around school safety as well. Our stakeholder meetings, as I mentioned, each school year, this group comes together to discuss past, present, and future safety and security of the school district. As you can see on the screen, both CPD, the EMS, all of our partners are a part of these meetings to give us input, because we're not the experts, and we want to learn from the experts, and we feel good about the input that they continuously provide to us on a quarterly basis. Our school resource officers, as you know, we have school resource officers, and that is a blessing. Not all school districts have school resource officers. We have, I think, a total of 12 or 13 at the high school level. At the elementary level, there have been questions, there have been comments around why we don't have one in each elementary school. And that, essentially is something that we're looking at. But we do have one SRO officer at every other school, so they share those responsibilities and duties and split two schools. But in terms of middle schools and high schools, we have one at every middle school and a couple at our high schools as well. Security audits. This is something that happens at every school, where we push on our schools in terms of the safety and the health with the assistance of local law enforcement. We conduct these ongoing audits. The school audits are performed 4 times a year randomly. So we're walking into buildings unannounced, and we're performing these audits. We give specific feedback in terms of what we feel needs to improve over the course of time as well. Tabletop sessions. Our tabletop sessions are conducted on a consistent basis as well, and these are essentially mock emergencies. So it's not something that's planned out, but it's those mock emergencies, and we talk about what we can do better in these particular emergencies and what systems and processes that might need to change over the course of time as well. Intruder drills, and you've probably heard a lot about these nationwide lately, but this is something that we have practiced as well. Each school is required to complete 2. We have some schools that actually complete more than 2, but the requirement is to do it at least a couple times a year. Emergency management team. A school emergency management team includes the administrator, office personnel, teachers, school nurses, lead custodians. Every component of the school, we actually have personnel that's involved, and this happens a couple times a year as well. NIMS training. Each emergency management team member is required to do NIMS training, and it's more specific. And you guys may notice that I'm going through these and giving an overview versus going into specifics. Does anybody know why I'm not necessarily going into specifics?
Security.
Got it. You got it. So you may notice across the country, a smart organization is an organization that doesn't necessarily dive into the specifics behind their plans. So it's not that we are evading any information or not wanting to provide information, but we want to give as much information as possible. I think I have a question card right in the middle here. I wanted to be intentional about why that is, but I also wanted to give you guys oversight in terms of what it is that we do as well. And NIM stands for National Incident Management System. Our camera systems across the district, we've put in thousands, I'll just say it that way, of cameras throughout our school district, inside and outside of our buildings, that give us a good look at what's going on. Pleased to say even our partners have access to those cameras as well, which we welcome when that opportunity presented itself. And the last couple things that I'll mention before we dive into to get some insight from our experts here is our visitor management system. Many of you know that when you go into a school in the Clarksville-Montgomery County School District, The visitor management system is one of the first things that you see when you come through those glass doors that you have to be buzzed into, which I'll talk a little bit about in just a second. But our visitor management system is a database, and it's not just a person signing in and signing out. We actually run a brief background on everyone that actually comes into the school. And if something comes back irregular, then we, of course, are contacting the authorities to assist with that particular person or situation. Civilian response to active shooter events. This is a response to active shooter events course designed to build on the avoid, deny, defend. So it's called CRAZE, and CRAZE is something that we're focusing on as a school district to ensure that we, again, build even more capacity throughout the school districts so we can be as prepared as possible for situations as we move forward also. Many of you have probably noticed in the last 4 years, I think we have had 13 buildings and one more card that's popped up over here. Our front entrances. These particular entrances and the design was very intentional. We worked with law enforcement, we worked with architects on what this should look like. So you may notice when you walk into a building now, it almost feels like you're locked into kind of a glass box in many cases. That's actually by design so the front office can let you in or not for obvious reasons. It's a safety measure, and it's something that the school district completed in terms of all schools over the course of the last few years. It's a major investment that makes sense. Again, this upgrade was all about security prior to some of the major incidents that we've seen across the country in the last few years. And the last couple things, or just a couple things that I'll mention as well, we also have panic systems on our school buses. We have panic buttons on the radios. We also have proximity card entrance. That means that, depending on who you are and what access you have in our buildings, you can actually take your access card and we'll let you in or not if you have access to a particular building. So those are a few things that as a school district that we've instituted that we don't necessarily talk about a whole bunch, but we thought it was a great opportunity to move forward with this forum and share at least some snippets of what we're doing as a school district. The last piece that I'll mention, and I think I have just a couple slides here, is just since 1990, there have been 22 shootings at elementary and secondary schools with 2 or more fatalities, not counting those perpetrators who have taken their own lives. Whereas 5 of these incidents have occurred over the course of the past 5 years since 2013, claiming the lives of 27 victims. The latter half of the 1990s witnessed 7 multiple fatality shootings with a total of 33 fatalities. 13 of those specifically were at Columbine. In fact, in 97-98 was the most awful school year with 4 multiple fatality shooting sprees at the hands of an armed student, specifically Pearl, Mississippi, West Paducah, Kentucky, and Jonesboro, Arkansas, and Springfield, Oregon. President Clinton formed a White House expert committee to advise him. Nearly a decade later, President Bush convened a White House conference on school safety as well in the wake of multiple fatality incidents during his administration as well. James Allen Fox, school shootings, indicated that school shootings are not necessarily new. What has changed since 97, 98? And we can see just from this data that 97, 98 was actually the worst year that we've had in America in terms of school shootings. But what's different now? Media. Not only media, but social media. That's one of the things, and thank you for indicating that. A lot of times, information gets out there quick, sometimes it's accurate, and sometimes it's what? But the bottom line, it's scary, especially when it has to do with our children. And it's something that we have to pay close attention to, whether it's accurate or not. So that has been a major game changer. Most people would have thought that these numbers actually took a big dive up. I think that the difference is how quick social media, gets things out there, quite frankly. One thing that we want to mention, has anybody heard about the National School Walkouts? By raise of hands. So actually, on the 14th, which is this coming Wednesday, will be the first of 3 organized national walkouts. And as you can see with the information on the screen, there are different organizers that are out there. I believe, and it's just my belief, they are really pushing towards organizing for the right reasons. But what are some of the concerns that are out there in terms of these walkouts? Anyone? Yes, sir.
Anti-gun.
What's that?
Anti-gun.
Anti-gun. What are some of the other concerns as a parent?
Safety of the kids.
Safety of the kids. There's a big organization going on of these walkouts, and what we know about school shooters is that they're generally pretty planful and methodical, and what that looks like. So our stance as a school district has been, while we're not going to take away the right for students to protest, we do want to institute some measures that will give students the opportunity to give a voice in a safe manner. So we've provided time on Tuesday, and we'll provide time on these other 2 days for students to give their voice by writing administrators, writing the legislators, writing whoever they would like to during that particular time period. Our hope is to keep students on campus. If parents specifically want their students to move forward and leave the school in protest, we ask that parents provide us with that permission, and students can take that information or bring us information to let us know if they've gotten that permission from their parents. So it's a double-edged sword. It's very difficult. You don't want to take away students' rights legally, but at the same time, our focus is to keep our students safe. So at this time, what I'd like to do before we take questions, I'd like to offer Chief Ansley as well as Sheriff Fuson the opportunity to have some opening comments as we dive into some of the questions.
First, let me say thank you for having me here. I'm Chief Ansley, been Chief of Police for a long time, 11 years. Some of the things the Director House talked about, I feel very comfortable, I feel very confident, and I'm very confident in our police department. I've trained professional officers. Some of the things we do, he mentioned audits. Those things are hands-on type. We go into the school, we put teams together in every school to see if they can get a pass, if they can get through without being challenged, which is very beneficial. If we do it, then that's a problem. But we're not going to say when that's happening, because it is, we don't tell them, we just do it. So that's one thing we talk about, work very closely with Sheriff Fuson. We have a very good relationship. When it comes to the safety of your children, our children, we take it very seriously here. I know there's a lot of questions concerning different topics today, but like I said, I'll answer anything I can. But I will tell you that I'm very confident, hopefully, in our police department, and how we train, how we react. That training has changed over the years. The Director mentioned Columbine. Since that incident, police departments have changed how they train in reaction to an incident like this. It's not we wait for the TAC team. The training we do now, what we instill all the time is you go. You go to the threat, whether it's one, hopefully more than one, but it may be just one officer going into that business or organization or school. I pray to God that doesn't happen, but if it does, I want you to know that I feel very confident, very proud of the police department, how we react to not only an incident, how I feel we would react to an incident like a Parkland, but every day, and the highly trained officers that we produce at the CPD. Thank you.
And as you all may know, the governor has recently put together a task force on school safety as well. And we're blessed to actually, right here in Clarksville, to have Sheriff Fuson, who the governor appointed to be on that task force. Thank you, Chief Ansley. At this time, Sheriff Fuson will address the crowd as well.
All right, thank you. This thing's on. Okay. Mr. House, I appreciate it, and I do appreciate being here tonight. And I know each and every one of you are here because you're concerned for your children, you're concerned for your safety of your children in school, and you just want to know a little bit about what's going on protective-wise that we're doing. And I can assure you, just as Chief Ansley had mentioned, that is one of our top priorities, is safety in this county, especially for our children in these school systems. It's a different place than what it was just 20 years ago. It's a different place than what it was just 10 years ago. I think a lot of you will acknowledge that. Our growth in this county has been very high. We have taken several different approaches for everything to do with that growth, including keeping the appropriate amount of SROs in our school system, keeping the training funds for our law enforcement high, and getting our numbers up in law enforcement to patrol the streets. Just over the last 5 years, and this didn't have anything to do with anything but our growth, our SRO program has doubled. Now, for those of you with children in the school system, you see one at every high school, every middle school, and you see one at just about every other elementary school. Now, it's my goal to make sure that we get one in every school eventually. But of course, there are other priorities that go along with school safety just besides SROs. The school system has been doing really good about beefing up the front entrances, camera security systems, the Raptor system that they said, that they implemented out in front of the school system that scans these people coming to the schools has been very effective. So there's a lot that's going on with school safety. As he mentioned, every quarter, and I believe it's more than every quarter that we get together, we talk about things that our school system's facing, and we talk about things and brainstorm about ways that we can counter those things. So every quarter is when we're required to meet, but I know that we meet more than that. I know that we reach out to Tommy Butler, and Tommy Butler reaches out to us about things that are of their concern. And of course, Mr. House mentioned a while ago, the social media effect. That really has a lot of parents concerned, with the threats that are going on out there. And I know that anytime that we get a threat for any school or any student or any facility in this county, we're going to be on top of it. And we have been very successful in locating those that have made those threats in the past. And I think that's just the connection that we have with our partners here to kind of solve those things, and our connections with our parents that have kids in these schools that have these concerns. So as Mr. House mentioned, I had the honor to be appointed by the governor to this safety task force. There's going to be a lot of discussion to be had within the next couple of weeks, and I think there's going to be a lot of fruit come from those discussions. There's already many bills down there at the legislature to do with school safety. We can either act with a motion and pass a bill that might not make a whole lot of sense after the fact, or we can really put our heads together and put some common sense things into law. And I know that this is what this group's goal is, and I'm just honored to serve on that and hopefully get us to where we need to be in the future. With that said, I know this is a forum type setting here. I want to give you all some opportunity to have your questions answered. But just as Mr. House said, there's only so much specifics that we can disclose, and I hope that you do understand that. And if you don't, I'm sorry. I'll go and apologize to you right now. But that is just too important an issue there to discuss in this type setting or in any type of public setting. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Mr. House.
And before we take our next question, I want to touch on something that Sheriff Fuson said that I think is very important. You guys have read in the news recently that since what happened in Marshall, Kentucky, since what happened in Florida, there have been some threats that have occurred in some of our schools. And what I want to do is tell you that the response from both the Sheriff's Department and CPD has been phenomenal. We've had boots on the ground in living rooms in those particular students' homes to identify whether they're credible threats or not within minutes. And I mean within minutes. And in some cases, like our last case, it's just not something that we're playing about. And unfortunately, we've had some students, even with them being non-credible threats, that it's changed their lives. These young students end up, in Columbia, and in jail. It's just not something that's a joking matter right now. And it causes a lot of angst, not only from students, but also from you, as well as parents. So I wanted to let you know that there's a lot that goes into that between the two agencies on each side of me, partnering and making sure that we do what's necessary to ensure that the right investigation is done. All the pieces of the puzzle is amazing to watch and kind of be a part of in terms of getting information as it happens. So I did want to mention that since he touched on it. So with that said, Mrs. Shelton will take our first question.
So what I'll do is read the questions and then direct it to someone here. And if we do run out of time, because we've got quite a few questions, if we run out of time at the end of the hour, what we'll do is make sure that we put all of these questions on the Facebook page and on the website with answers, full answers to them. So all of your questions will be answered. So the first question actually ties right into what you all were just talking about. What interagency communication plans do the three of you have in times of crisis? I think Tommy Butler, you want to, because you kind of coordinate all of that together?
Well, I think that, I don't like cameras, I'm gonna move. I think you've heard the partnership goes on and on. The school system and law enforcement continually works with each other. Very broadly, they help us develop all of our response plans. And on a daily basis, we're working through both preventative and reactionary issues in schools. Our principals hold the SRO in their school very highly. With CPD, I work with all three district captains almost daily on issues. And as far as communication means, we have all the technologies to communicate with each other, all the proper contacts. And again, we just work together on a daily basis.
Thank you. So, Dr. Empiricus, I think I'm going to ask you to come up here and respond to this one. What are some of the ways you're allowing students to express themselves on 314 while keeping them safe? And I know Mr. House did answer a little bit of that.
Sure, Mr. House pretty much answered that question, but we thought it was very important for student voice. We met with student government from all the schools and talked to them about what they were hearing and what they were thinking. And overwhelmingly, they talked about that they really didn't want to be involved in the headlines of the story. What was important to them was student safety. And so they talked within their schools about forming a time that they could communicate to leaders or organizations about their thoughts and feelings. We certainly know that some may want to take it further than that. And Mr. House described that process. We do need parent permission. We have coordinated with law enforcement just to ensure that our campuses are safe, not necessarily about what we think our students will do, but to make sure that our campuses are safe during those time periods. So student voice and safety are our guiding principle when it comes to those walkout days. We want to make sure that their First Amendment rights are secured and they have that opportunity. At the same time, if it's disruptive in any manner, then we will take it upon ourselves to act accordingly and follow code of conduct.
Thank you.
I just want to add to that too. I know that some of the parents may be concerned about how the law enforcement presence is going to be on that day. When the school system has them sign out with their parents' permission, we're still going to have staff at the school. We're going to have additional staff inside the building. And I know Mr. House mentioned a while ago that sometimes folks that mean to do us harm look for those opportunities. Well, when you have a distraction like that, that could create an opportunity for people like that, and we definitely don't want to see that happen. So we're going to have the SROs and additional SROs in the school, and we're also going to have extra patrols with the help of CPD on the campuses too, looking out for things bad to happen.
This may be a question for any of you, or Tommy, or Captain Farley, either one. What about building a wall or some type of shield in the classrooms?
Stand right here, Tommy.
Well, this is one of the examples of what a lot of people don't realize that make the physical security of buildings so challenging is the life safety aspect, which is the fire code. So while we have to think continuously about not letting the wrong people in, we also have to think continuously about every single person being able to get out, regardless of their abilities. So when you hear about more barricades, walls, these kind of things, and most of the devices that you see sold for classroom doors are against the fire code. So we're always balancing that.
You may as well just stay up here. In 2013, the NRA started National School Shield. Why hasn't CMCSS taken advantage of this? I'm familiar with that. Sheriff, are you?
I'm not too terribly familiar with that. I know there's a lot of programs out there nationally that school systems adopt. But I know that what we're doing here is a standardized practice for school safety. But I could not speak to that program, so I'm not too terribly familiar with it.
And what I will say about that, I'm not familiar with it either, but again, in 2012, after Sandy Hook, a part of our plan in Charlotte was to work with Homeland Security, work with law enforcement partners, work with FBI, and that was a part of our stakeholders group. And what I can tell you is that while we may not have that specific program that we work towards, I feel like what we have in terms of our stakeholder setup and our stakeholder relationship is strong. Again, I've been in 3 school districts, and in terms of what's been invested, and let me say this, we can always be better. We can always be better. But what I do see currently in terms of the thinking around it, the partnership around it, the structural input that our county has put into our schools, it's just as good as most across the country.
This is another question, possibly Tommy, I'm not sure. Are you considering putting alarms on entrance or exit doors to prevent students from opening doors to allow individuals and unauthorized entrance?
We're just going to give you a mic.
I think just pull a chair up to the table.
And I guess the question's talking about like doors that you see that, say if you exit out this door, open this door, that alarm will sound.
I think so.
Yeah, so we don't have a lot of that in schools. It's not to say that we couldn't. I think when you think about the number of doors in every school or a high school, I don't know necessarily what advantage that would give us. I know that we are looking at it in one building now, a little bit different type of building, where there's not so many folks around, but I don't think that it's something that would give us a lot of advantage for them to make a sound every time a door's open, when you consider what it takes to flow a building with 1,600 students in it and 100 employees to flow them in and out.
And this is another one. What are plans to make our classrooms more secure? I'm locking my interior door, but have a door that is glass on the outside of the building. I think this is from an employee.
Well, and I could get deep into our plans, and I know that they said that we're not going to cover certain things. I will tell you that we are working with schools, and that there are more options that they have. So I think when someone asks that question, they're thinking about turn out the lights and hide. And we are working with teachers and students on what their options are.
Can teachers and students lock classroom doors from the inside if they need to shelter in place?
Yes.
Part of the process. That's actually a part of our process, without going through too deep into it. When students enter a classroom and teachers enter that classroom for instruction, every building, every classroom actually has an interior lock on it. Those locks are locked when instruction's going on.
Ms. Sheriff, this is probably for you. Are you considering an increasing the number of SROs or other armed security at the schools? What about allowing properly trained faculty or staff to be armed?
Well, I know that's a question that's going all around the state. There's other states that are also considering allowing teachers to go armed, and I know that's a hot topic. But in my opinion, based on what I know, because my wife's a 20-year teacher in this system, that teachers got enough to do to worry about toting guns in school and addressing threats that come in the building. They've got some of them 18 to 25 kids there to protect in that room. I don't think the answer is to give them a weapon and let them focus on that with all the other things that they have to do. So now as far as the SROs go, you know, there is a plan to get an SRO in every single school. And I know some of the elementary school parents have really been on it about not seeing one at their particular elementary school because they typically share a school. And then when folks are out sick, of course, you know, they might be covering 3 schools. But there is a plan to get one in every school. But if you really look at priorities and look at, you know, schools and threat levels of schools, not saying that any one school is any more dangerous than the other, but as you could imagine, the priority to staff other schools with a second SRO might be more pressing than staffing one at every elementary school. So there is a methodical plan to get additional SRO staffing at each of these schools. And that's just going to take time to get. As I mentioned a while ago, our program's doubled just in the last 5 years. That on top of the other priorities that as a law enforcement agency has, you know, that we have to face. So that dollar gets stretched pretty good, you know, and I'll stretch it as much as I possibly can to get the coverage that we need to keep these schools as safe as possible.
Thank you. This next question I'm actually going to answer because I know the answer. Is there a reason we put the blueprint of 4 schools on Facebook and the Leaf Chronicle? I did talk to the facilities engineer about that. We did receive a request from the newspaper to have those blueprints. They're not actually blueprints that we have on Facebook and on the website. They are actually just kind of sketches of them that's going to show the expansion, and you can get a lot more detail from Google Earth. So, but in the future, at the same time, we're not going to be providing those for security reasons. Regarding new construction, what safeguards are being implemented that are not currently being used? The bulletproof doors and glass, locking devices for classrooms. Are there plans to retrofit existing schools with new safety devices? And are there federal grants available for this? And are we applying? And Mr. Butler, I think the director brought you a chair up here.
Well, I think that when we continually look for facility improvements, as was pointed out when we started, we did a lot to upgrade our entrances, to limit that flow into the school, and I think you talked about federal grants. We've gotten some grants in the past, and of course we have an awesome grant department at the school system that continually looks for those things. And there's nothing that we wouldn't apply for if it was available for us to do that.
And generally what you find is those grants come in waves. And it's generally the waves, and we're in one of those waves right now where something major has happened in the country on a couple different occasions. Generally over the course of the next 365 days, opportunities present themselves. And so we'll definitely take a look at those opportunities when they come about. If there are opportunities that would benefit us or possibly our law enforcement partners, we will definitely look at applying for some of those grants.
And this question kind of has been answered by the sheriff, but I'm going to ask Chief Ansley if you might respond to this one. Several districts across the country, including districts in Tennessee, are allowing staff to undergo training and carry firearms. Why don't we? Past incidents have proven that one armed person is not enough.
First, let me say I would agree with the sheriff as far as arming staff or teachers. I would agree. I don't think it's a good idea, but I'm not going to talk about the liability that I believe that would be presented to the school. I'll speak from a tactical standpoint. If something like this were to happen, you'd have to know that this is a chaotic situation that we, as law enforcement officers, would be going into. We don't wear these uniforms We don't wear these to look pretty. We wear these so you can identify. We don't wear these hot polyester wool uniforms. We wear them so you know who we are. So if I'm entering a school to negotiate a threat, that's what I'm looking for. If I see somebody with a weapon in their hand, that brings mass confusion into that. And there's a good chance that something very bad can happen. I would be opposed to it. I would agree with Sheriff as far as arming. The training that one would have to undergo would be very, very extensive. And just today, I'm not going to mention where it happened. I just walked in here and I was told about an incident occurred where two guys, one of them shot the other with a rifle, accidental shooting just today, as soon as I walked in the door. So it happened. So weapons are certainly, I'm not going to get into the Second Amendment, but something that you have to be trained highly on. I know we have a lot of military and a lot of police officers, ex-police officers. But the liability I think that present is enormous, but also the tactical, to us, the tactical disadvantage that it would create, I believe would be a problem.
Why do we not have metal detectors in our schools at the access points? And their follow-up questions, why do we hear about the threats from our children first, then the school? And how is one SRO supposed to patrol and keep safe, and forgive me if I'm not saying this, an entire school? Which one would you like to start? I think Tommy with the metal detectors or Mr.
So
House?
metal detectors, I've actually worked in a school district where we attempted to move forward with metal detectors. And what we found happening, especially at the high school level, it didn't last very long, simply because at that particular school there were about 1,200 students, and you have to imagine what TSA does at the airport, and trying to get students in a timely manner. We had to change bus schedules, which means students had to start school about 20 minutes earlier at the high school level, just so we could deal with the flow of getting students through. That wasn't enough time, quite frankly. Not to mention students that wanted to eat breakfast. So it became a logistical issue, and what we tried to do with that particular school was to limit things to one entrance, much like we have in our schools right now. So it ended up being a major logistical issue. Now, we used them at our major events, like athletic events and other things, but it was just the logistical piece and being able to get the flow of students in a timely manner to start instruction. So I know that's one of the major reasons that many school districts don't use them. It worked well for us in one school where it was our smallest high school in the district, where we had about 250 students, where the flow of students getting in was fairly quick, and it was actually our highest risk school in the district. So it actually worked in that particular situation. The next question was?
And this is probably for Chief and Sheriff to answer, but why do we hear about the threats from our children first and then the school, and what's going on behind the scenes?
Well, I think as far as hearing it from your children, they're so connected to social media, that stuff flies really quick. And a lot of times before I know school administration hears about it, an SRO might pick up on it if a student mentions it to them, but as far as parents being notified by the school administration, of course, I'm sure, I can't speak for them, they don't want to send out messages to parents just based on a rumor that may be going around social media. We definitely don't want to create a scare. So I would have to say that's just their tune or their connection with their social media as far as it getting to the parents real quick. And it's a lot on these kids' minds. They see the same things that we see, and they're concerned as well. And that's the best way I know to answer that. And I know the other part of that question, Mr. Hauser, if you wanted to add anything to that.
I might just add that each situation is different, and we're working with law enforcement to get facts. And during an investigation, we're looking to hear back from law enforcement to make sure that we give information in the most accurate way possible. The last thing that we would want to do is to have to redact information and say, hey, this is what we heard, and 30 minutes later, I'm sorry, it wasn't credible. This is actually what happened. So we try to get all of the information and make sure that the building level principal, because we're working closely with the building level principal, law enforcement, to make sure that we get the right insight and we provide that insight. And luckily enough, the situations that we have had where we've had to communicate with parents through our messenger program, our messenger system, have been non-credible threats that have occurred. But we try to get that information as quick to parents as possible and as accurate to parents as possible.
Chief, do you want to add anything?
Just like that, just last week, we brought charges on an individual that made a threat, violation of civil rights. One thing I would like to add, we follow up on, we stay on social media as well. We check it all the time. If we get, not just from the school, we have a very good relationship, Ms. Shelton, our PO, but we get something, we follow up on it. Like I said last week, I think it's important. I don't care if it's a joke. There is no joke when it comes to making a threat. Some kid playing needs to be held responsible. Parents need to be held responsible. Like I said, we did charge one last week, but it is difficult in trying to work with the DA's office to find something to charge them with. That's why we went with the civil rights violation.
Thank you. Sheriff, I think you had the next question. How is one SRO supposed to patrol and keep safe an entire school?
As I said, trying to build this SRO program the way that it needs to be, I'd like to bring that person that asked that question to the next budget committee with me, because I tell you, getting the help that we need is sometimes difficult, but I know having at least some level of presence at every school, I think is important. Some of these schools do need additional help because of the size of the school based on population. That's actually one of the things that I brought up at that committee, talking about what we need to do for schools based on student population. But there's also a lot of other variables that go into staffing SROs at a school. And I know as far as planning goes, we try to put the resources exactly where they need to be, but it's just a matter of having some level of presence at every school and then working to improve the program from there. So it is difficult for one to run that school, as you can imagine, with 1,000 to 1,500 kids sometimes. But they do a very good job. They're very connected with the kids that they serve, and I think it's that they're doing great, but it could always be better.
Mr. Butler, if you would answer this one, I believe. What process is in place to prevent active shooters from gaining access to our school buses?
Well, that's a tough question. Buses are out there by themselves. We go through crisis response training with drivers. They have emergency communications, panic buttons on the buses. But it is definitely a challenge, and we do that training with them every year, and they can do the communication on the radio.
And this is another door question. Does Clarksville-Montgomery County Schools have any of the low-cost door locks that teachers can put on the school doors where they can't be opened from the outside in the hall? I think that had to do with your fire code issue, right?
Yeah, and like I said earlier, there are a lot of devices that go on either the opening arm or can be mounted in the floor, and most all of those are in direct contradiction to what fire code requires you to do, which is a one-action exit. So, no.
Dr. Empiricus, this may be a question for you. The high schools have a 1-to-1 ratio of student to computers, and students aren't able to access social media accounts on these school-issued computers. What steps are being taken to protect these students from online bullying and online predators?
So everything on that computer is channeled through our technology department and their filter. And so even when they're home, it's channeled through our filter. That's the way it's designed. So technology monitors correspondence all the time. Not unusual for a principal to get notification from technology that something's going on, and we investigate those quickly, swiftly. So actually, our ability to see what's going on in these computers is in real good shape. And so we're dealing with that on a daily basis. As far as threats go, bullying and harassment are mandatory reports for teachers regarding our students, for administrators to act. A recent law last year stated that a credible threat, electronic threat, could lead to a year out of school. So those are investigated. If they're proven to be a bullying situation or a credible threat, then counseling and discipline are certainly implemented.
I think this question ties in with that one. What actions are you taking to prevent bullying, particularly when dealing with repeat offenders?
So again, we have a bullying policy that's guided by the state, and one of the definitions of bullying is the repeated nature of bullying. So the consequences certainly go up, and remandments can happen to alternative school if it's a violation of law, which it could be. Then law enforcement is involved. So each of those is analyzed and evaluated based on our code of conduct, and then we apply discipline, sometimes counseling when necessary. If it's a situation where a threat is happening, and we have the opportunity and the right to institute safety plans. So we have put safety plans on certain students at times. It means they have to check in with the SRO when they come to school and throughout the day before they leave. So we're aggressive about it regarding the threat. We follow the code of conduct and sometimes the law related to it.
Some of the questions are kind of becoming repetitive a little bit just because everybody was writing down questions before I started reading them. But I will ask this question, whether we will allow teachers, Mr. House, or staff to have the choice of carry and conceal or have and safe, providing they meet specific criteria and list a number of criteria.
Okay, I think both Chief Ansley and Sheriff Fuson answered that question. It's kind of a matter of opinion. My job as director of schools is not necessarily to have an opinion on that, but it's to move forward and execute whatever it is that the state puts in place and what all law enforcement puts in place. I think you heard from the experts in terms of their opinion, but of course I will acquiesce around whatever it is that the state and law enforcement focuses on. As a parent of two students in the Clarksville-Montgomery County School District, I would tend to agree with exactly what they mentioned. I think Chief Ansley made a perfectly good, gave a perfectly good description in terms of what kind of confusion that could cause in a major scenario on one of our campuses.
This question, can we ensure that all surveillance cameras are operational, maintained, and monitored?
They are monitored on a daily basis as far as being operational. They're all new. We started about 3 years ago of replacing all of the analog camera systems with new IP technology. The schools have more cameras, better cameras than ever, and our technology department actually manages those, and they get alerts when cameras are down, which is a huge improvement to the way that it used to be. We don't have staff that could literally sit there and watch the nearly 3,000 cameras all day, every day. It would take a whole fleet of people larger than this room to do that effectively as far as watching them, but they are watched from time to time, and then they definitely help us to go back and look at things in an active mode.
And also, as far as random locker searches, are we doing those, have we done those, and are they 100% searched?
The schools don't currently do random locker searches. They do if they have reason to search a locker, but they don't have randoms. Or they do?
No. Well, the state law. You have to have for a school district administrator to search a locker, you have to have a reasonable suspicion. You can't just randomly search lockers.
Just keep that microphone if you would, and I'll ask this next question. Does CMCSS have any partnerships with mental health experts besides Centerstone? Not everyone qualifies according in parentheses, for those students who show red flags for behavior in all grade levels, elementary included. Asterisk, the Parkland shooter was known by students and teachers as being a threat. How do we give these students the help they need? Public school is not the answer for some.
It's a great question. It's something we've looked deeply into this last year. Of course, Fort Campbell offers services too, but you're right. There's a segment of our population that mental health services are a challenge for. In fact, there are people with great insurance that are waiting 2 or 3 months in this county to get mental health services. So it's something that we are doing strategic work on. We formed an agreement for next year with Mental Health Co-op to do exactly that. So whether you've got insurance, whether you have an advocacy as far as special ed or 504 or a general ed student, and we understand something is going on, then we'll have a partnership with Mental Health Co-op to work with some of our most severe kids. Now, if it's a single incident or a gradually progressive incident that's becoming more alarming, we do have the ability to call mobile crisis and to do an immediate evaluation and determine the mental health status of the student involved. So we do have partnerships. Those partnerships are going to get strengthened. It's part of next year's budget. The challenge that we face is the challenge that society faces when it comes to mental health support. But it is important. It is part of our strategic work, and we want to eliminate any barriers for any students to receive appropriate mental health services.
And this one is kind of a statement and then a question that's been answered. My son is 6 years old and has autism. Because of his inability to keep himself safe, we do not keep guns in our home. If federal policy allows teachers to be armed, will CMCSS allow teachers to be armed on campus? And how are you going to choose which teachers are allowed to carry? And I think that question has been answered. What do CMCSS and police, law enforcement think is an adequate number of SROs district-wide or per school? I think, Sheriff, you said 1 per school, correct?
Well, in some cases too, at particular high schools and middle schools, but yeah, it's definitely ideal to have presence at every school. Some schools, as the other question brought up, was how can one patrol the whole school? Well, those schools need an additional one. So ideally, 2 in some high schools, but all in at least every school.
And this is a two-part. Tommy, I don't know if you or Dr. Empiricus would answer this one. There are no cameras in classrooms. Why?
We do actually have a few cameras in classrooms. It's evaluated on what would be the purpose of having them in those classrooms. So, but we do in fact have a few, and requests are made from time to time to have some added, and those are looked at on an individual basis.
Sheriff, this one is for you. The law doesn't allow for any gray areas. What training are SROs doing to maintain the safety of our special needs children because they can't react or respond like they would an adult?
Well, that SROs are required to have additional training specific to working in a school environment. And we're also required, law enforcement in general, is to have extra training for dealing with persons with mental disabilities. So that training is in place. I mean, is it more needed? Absolutely more is needed. And we never train for the minimum, and I know CPD doesn't either. We want to train for the best benefit for our employees for the things that they're interacting with, but there are current training in place and required for SROs, specifically to schools, and for law enforcement in general, dealing with people with mental disabilities.
Kids in the past during these shootings call their parents on their cell phones. What ideas does the school system have to notify parents and how to respond, plan in place of where parents pick up their children?
So the district made a significant investment in a system called Messenger. And many of you may be annoyed from time to time getting those messages that come home, but it's not necessarily just for informational purposes, but it's also for safety purposes. So we have means of getting in touch with families and parents, not only via cell phone, but also via email as well. In case of emergencies, we can identify particular groups within Messenger that we need to contact. So if it's at a particular school, a particular group at that school that we need to contact, we have that ability to narrow down deep enough to contact that particular school or that particular group of parents at a school as well. So that is one means. Another means, quite frankly, is working with law enforcement and the media as well in some instances. So we try our best to ensure that we always continue to work with law enforcement, but we'll always continue to use our district means as well in our messenger program, in our messenger system.
And I think this is probably our last question. And again, I've got a stack that we will respond to online, and you may have a culminating statement at the end here. This is a question, and I'm not sure, I don't want to read too much into it, but how are county resources able to respond and test mock active shooter, police, EMS, fire?
If I understand the question right, it's how we're able to test those for when an incident happens? Is that?
I think so.
I think just through tabletops and general exercises that we have, most of the time in the summer, so it doesn't interrupt the school day. But ideally, it would be, sometime during the school year, we have some students involved with that. That way, they would have some kind of understanding of how an incident like that might unfold should they be involved with one. But a lot of those trainings take place in the summertime with all the public safety in Montgomery County at particular schools. And over the last several years, we've bounced over to different schools just because of their layout. A lot of the schools are laid out similar. Some of them are not, like Montgomery Central. So we do train at those schools with EMS, fire, CPD, and the school system.
Mr. House, would you like to make a comment?
Sure. I want to first of all mention that the forum today is actually being taped, and we will post it on our Facebook page and our YouTube channel for those that didn't have the opportunity to sit in seats this evening. We want as many people in the community to get insight or the same insights that you all had the opportunity of doing so tonight. Also, the questions that we didn't have a chance to answer, we are going to answer those particular questions and post them on our Facebook page as well as part of the Q&A. And lastly, I just want everyone to know and understand that this is very important to us. School safety, again, as a father, and I know we have a few fathers that are sitting up here right now, and lots of mothers, fathers, grandmothers, grandfathers in the audience tonight, know that it's just as important to us as it is to you as well. It's personal and professional. And even though we feel like we have a strong infrastructure in terms of safety, we can always get better. And that's a part of what our focus is as a school district. And while we continuously meet, and while we continuously focus our efforts on looking at the national landscape, and then looking at ourselves in terms of what we can do different, what we can focus on. So with that said, if you don't mind giving our panel a hand for taking the time. We have the highest level of public safety sitting on both sides of me, and I'm very appreciative for that partnership. And thank you all as parents. It shows that, with 150 people sitting in the audience, that you all, this is important to you all as well. Have a great evening.